Committee, Select Board, and School Committee on January 29th, 2026. Do you guys want to officially call yourselves in, or?
Sure. Yeah, we'd like to call the Select Board into session on our January 29th, 2026 special meeting with the Finance Committee.
Catherine, do you want to call yourselves in, or no?
Are we officially?
It's up to you.
No, I think we're fine.
Okay, all right, that's fine. So we'll start with open forum. So if anybody has anything that isn't further on the agenda that you'd like to say, come forward.
Chief, we may have to move that mic just to the corner while they're speaking so they can be heard.
You can just
Thanks.
introduce yourself and in 2 minutes.
Yep. I'm gonna go quick. It's gonna be great. Hi, my name is Christine Dusome. I teach 4th grade at day school, teachers union president. Long time no see. I was here last week, but I just wanted, I came with another handout. I can,
Here, you can. Dennis.
oh. Before Dr. Chu speaks, I just wanted to add a few words. That he's here tonight to answer questions in regard to the balanced budget that school committee just voted on. And I'm not sure how many people in the room had the time to watch that meeting, but I just wanted to summarize a few points. The budget that Dr. Chu and Courtney Moran are going to be proposing is around $700,000 less than what was requested in order to meet the needs of our current students. And I mentioned Valerie Young. She mentioned at the end of the school committee meeting, she stated that a yes on the budget isn't a yes that they would like to keep class sizes so large and that they want to keep the per pupil expenditure as low as it is. Valerie stated that the budget is fragile and creates low morale in our schools. She stated we're in a survival mode, and Dr. Chu said that next year we are going to go off a cliff. These are extremely strong statements by people who are very familiar with our schools. And unfortunately, our students and staff are carrying the burden of our underfunded public schools. And so, with the good help of one of my teammates and colleagues, she put together this spreadsheet. And you'll notice at the top that the DESE dark districts that are comparable to Westford are there. But also next to it are the adjacent districts. And then niche is a national recognition that ranks all of the schools. So we wanted to include that as well. And so I know the fire department spoke, police is here tonight, and I feel like all of the big departments are in town. We are all coming from hearing a similar message. And that's that Westford cannot fund the services that we know the community deserves. I know fire said their training, things aren't going as smoothly as they would like. So our question tonight on behalf of the WEA, we would like to know, what is the town going to do about it? The first option is do nothing and watch the town become undesirable, which is obviously unacceptable, but maybe inevitable. We tried an override. We've tried 3 times. 1 time was successful. But the WEA, we have over 500 members. We feel the direction that the town should go in is looking at the tax rates. Sean Kelly mentioned that the residents are carrying 90% of the taxes. And so what we want to do, and it's laid out here, is that we don't want the taxpayers to carry the burden that all of the departments No department in town wants to say, well, we serve the community better. No, we're first, we're second. No, that's not how we want to do things. So we are going to ask that we want the community members to have a tax rate similar to Andover, similar to Littleton, similar to Lexington, where their businesses, the rate is almost
Christine, can I just-
doubled. Yeah.
So you're
yeah.
asking for a split tax rate, is that what you're saying?
We would like the tax rate higher for businesses. And that is not a one size fits all. We know that obviously if you take like Muffins on Main, compare it to Market Basket, Whole
Sure.
Foods, it's very different. But we feel, our association feels, we do not want the burden on the shoulders of the taxpayers.
Understood.
We feel that this is the only way to get the large amounts of money. Efforts have been made, and we've talked about them at school committee.
Can I just stop you right
Yeah,
there, because
absolutely.
think
I
we
know,
get
I
the
know, I
message.
go, yeah, I know.
And
Yep.
we get the
So-
message, yep.
We wanted to come here tonight because we're, school committee, Dr. Chu Courtney, in the WEA, we are committed to our students and our staff, and we want what's best. And all we hear is that there's not enough money. So we are presenting what we think would be an avenue that seems doable.
Okay,
So thank you.
Thanks.
I'm sorry, wait,
Yeah.
does anybody, do we want to address that?
That's up to
Tom,
you.
do you want to weigh in on that?
Is that okay with you, Madam
It's okay
Chair?
with
Just
me.
try-
If
try to do
you
30
want
seconds.
to.
Yeah,
So the way the split tax rate could work, so Christine's exactly right. We could decide to do a split tax rate, and every year the select board decides whether to do that or not. That doesn't change the levy. It doesn't change the total amount of money that gets raised. It changes where it comes from. And so if you shift it, we wouldn't have more dollars to spend. It would just mean that we would incrementally take fewer of those dollars from the homeowners and more of them from the businesses. There are good reasons back and forth. We actually had a detailed committee a couple of years ago that did sort of a deep dive on it and looked at what's the impact on attracting businesses, what's the, sort of all the pluses and minuses, and at that point, that committee landed on keeping the same. But it's absolutely a live topic, and every year we can come back and look at that. But as a solution to pulling in more dollars, it doesn't change the total collection. I guess it would change the way that a potential override would be born if you did that. So if you did shift it and then you did an override, you'd be taking in that ratio, so it might have that effect. Does that help? Did I get it right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Good.
Thank you. Good evening, my name's Jackie Cuniff, and I've lived here on Tadmouth Road since 2009. I've raised 2 children here, both of whom went through our excellent public schools and both received a stellar education. I've also worked as an educator in town since 2013. I'm here tonight because I care very much for our community, especially our schools. I've seen firsthand how critical adequate funding is to maintaining the quality of our schools. Our schools are one of Westford's greatest strengths, and they need better, more sustainable funding if we want them to remain strong. I'd like to express my sincere appreciation to our school committee, our superintendent, Dr. Chu, the entire Westford Schools leadership and staff working to stretch a very tight budget while maintaining many services as possible for our students, even in the face of these severe budget cuts. I also want to thank the Select Board and the Budget Task Force for their work, particularly for the decision to begin pay-as-you-throw. I think that was a thoughtful and responsible decision that supports the town's long-term financial stability. As a resident who actively supported the most recent override effort, I recognize that there does not appear to be sufficient community support at this time for another override attempt. And given that reality, I respectfully ask the town to consider other available tools. I was going to talk about the split tax rate. I'll have to understand that a little more, but I'm just going to read what I had to
Sure.
say anyway. The last time Westford used a split tax rate was in 2019. Many nearby towns, including Littleton, have a split tax rate, where commercial properties are taxed at a significantly higher rate than residential properties. I hope our town government will revisit this option as a way to raise needed revenue while balancing the impact on its residents. Thank you for hearing me, and thank you for all you do for our town.
Thanks, Jackie.
Okay, anybody else? Anyone online?
I don't see any hands raised online.
Okay. Let's go to our first agenda item, and we have public safety and the police department up. Chief, you're on.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'll just give a brief description of the changes that are included in our proposed fiscal
And I'll
27.
give you the option if whether you want to go through that or not. If you would like to, go right ahead. If not, we can jump into questions.
Jump into questions.
If there was something particular you wanted to say, go for it, but I think we're all good. All right, let's start with questions.
No questions. I just wanted to start by saying this is the police department. Myself and John and Leffers met with the police chief and the deputy last Friday. We had a very fruitful, I think, discussion. And I mean, the police department's looking for less than a 1% increase in its budget. Was it $7 million? About a $7 million budget, right?
Yes.
And, you know, we had an opportunity to go through all the material. I want to also recognize the chief for the addition of reporting the opioid rates to the Board of Health. Ray Dick gave you credit for that, which he was here, so that was good. That was something that was a concern for a while. As far as the information that was provided to us, the property tax, the property crime and the personal crime is remaining low and fairly stable. The accident rate has kind of gone down. And the only thing that was kind of interesting, and if the chief wants to explain this, that's up to him, who doesn't, is that there was an uptick in protective orders and Section 12s, which are involve people being taken in for mental health issues, right? So what it would sort of suggest is that there's some sort of maybe some sort of tension going on in the community that, you know, maybe, I don't think it's a significant number, but it spiked a little bit. And then the only thing is I guess there's 4 people in the academy. All of them are replacements for retirements, so that's the picture.
So if I could just clarify, the 4 that we discussed they came out of the academy during fiscal 26.
Okay.
We will not have any in the academy in fiscal 27. We are fully staffed. We have no openings. Everybody made it successfully. The 4 officers that graduated the academy last year all made it successfully through their field training programs, and they are all currently working full-time on the road. Very satisfied, very happy with the work that we're getting out of our officers. The protective order in Section 12s, any opinion I have is completely speculation. You know, I've been doing this job for 27, almost 28 years now. You see ebbs and flows within the communities, and I think that's just what we're seeing. I think there's a lot of polarizing things going on out in the communities, and I think that people feel that everywhere. So, but again, I couldn't explain the cause. We did discuss changes in some of the protective orders that came out in 2024 where they added a coercion clause to the protective orders, emergency restraining orders, where, you know, sometimes people will stay in abusive relationships because of financial strain and
Yeah, it was interesting.
the person, manipulation, and now that actually qualifies for those protective orders.
There's one thing I'd like to add, and this is just for the edification of the board as selectmen. We had a good discussion about trying to gauge service demand, and so I know the previous chief came forward and offered some data basically on call numbers, and we had a good conversation about the idea that numbers alone don't give you the true picture. You have to have some sort of a ability to gauge what time commitments were involved in each of those calls. For example, there's a big difference between somebody calling up for directions and using that as a call versus somebody who's answering a domestic dispute at one of the apartments. So that needs to be distinguished when we start looking at staffing issues again for the police department. And the chief's aware of that, and I think he's came up with some pretty interesting ideas about how to handle that. So I just want to make sure that we had that on the record.
Yes.
I just have a question. I was pleased today to see that the governor announced a intent to she's filed legislation and issued an executive order as it relates to some of the horrific actions of ICE by the federal Trump administration that have occurred around the country against American citizens. And part of that is to ensure that citizens of Massachusetts recognize they're protected. I also saw that the Stowe Police Department recently had issued a statement regarding ICE enforcement in their community. And I'm just curious if Westford's thought this through from a police perspective, and if policy's already been considered. Granted, we'll see whether the governor's legislation, which I think further protects citizens from where ICE can do its business, ends up being signed into law. But just curious if you have any comment on that.
Well, I know it is a hot button issue. We did provide guidance to the community starting back in May. We've issued the guidance from the Attorney General's office. We also provided some of the information that was given to police departments from the Mass Chiefs. All that stuff is available on our website. We've met with Indivisible Westford as well as the League of Women Voters to discuss this issue. We're always open to have additional conversations surrounding it. But essentially, for the police department, it comes down to Commonwealth versus Lund, which is we are not involved in immigration law. We do not detain people based on immigration detainers. If it's a federal warrant for an immigration crime or crime related to the immigration, then we have to act on it because it's treated just like any other warrant. We do not work closely with ICE. However, they are a federal law enforcement agency. So if they were to come to town on an unrelated issue from immigration, we would cooperate with them for an investigation, just not when it comes to the immigration side of it. So they do other enforcement outside of immigration. We do work with other federal partners, the ATF, the DEA, the FBI. We have excellent relationships with them. We don't have a great relationship with ICE. From what I've seen, they don't really contact the local police departments when they come out to do an enforcement action. But I would just like the community to know that we are not involved with immigration enforcement. If we are called to assist, it is strictly to be there as witnesses, bystanders, and make sure that everybody stays safe. Unless we see a blatant violation of use of force and an officer has a duty to intervene, and that's only when it's very, very clear cut, that would be the only time we can interfere with an ICE operation, is to prevent a blatant violation of use of force, and that is it. If we were to interfere or intervene in an ICE operation, it's going to open the officer, the town, to significant liabilities. So we've tried to provide as much information as possible, both through social media, on our website. We've met with community groups. So, and like I said earlier, we're always happy to have further conversations if there's any groups out there that would like to have further conversation.
Well, it's unfortunate that we're in such a situation, but I just want to thank you and all the members of Westford Police Department for doing the best you can in what's pretty untested waters. So thank you.
Can I ask a point of clarification just on that, on your last statement? So the ability or obligation to intervene in the use of force is in which direction is that, or is that in both directions? With if ICE is using force in a blatant overreach sort of a manner, versus a protester using a use of force against an ICE officer, does it go both ways or one way?
We would be there to maintain the peace.
Okay.
So we would try to keep the parties separate as much as possible. Obviously, force for us would be a last resort on either side, but it's more geared towards the intervention or the interaction of the ICE agent with the individual. If they're using an excessive amount of force that the situation completely doesn't call for, that's when we have a duty to intervene, and that would be pretty much the only time that we could really interfere, because they work under much different parameters than we do. And unless something is, when you see it, you just go, oh my God, that's horrible, which is, I'm going to be honest, it's a lot different for a police officer than it is for a civilian. With our training under use of force, I've never seen a good-looking use of force. You know, when I was a road supervisor, there were times that it was ugly when you're just rolling around on the ground, and it looks terrible, but that's what you have to do to detain that person. So our training would kick in if, if somebody's standing there and they run up and get smashed with with a baton, that's an excessive use of force where we would very likely be able to intervene. We'd be able to recognize it and intervene at that point. But it's only when we have an opportunity to, and it's a blatant disregard for the standards.
Great, thank you.
Chief, so you said that you were fully staffed, and that's 48
48. Yes.
right now? Okay. And that's down to from 25.
Mhm.
Can you talk about how that number is working for you? Like, how are you managing the workload?
So a lot of where we were trying to get to with the 50 officers was to address our minimum manning standards. We're still under the same standards as 1980, despite our town growing. And we've added significant amount of officers, but the minimum manning standard that we have is set so we never go below it.
Yep.
So if we have an officer out injured and we have a certain, our minimum manning is 3, if we go down to 2,
Right.
we
Extra.
backfill that spot, but it can be ordered into duty, where we don't have that option if our minimum manning doesn't increase. Even if we're trying to increase even though we've increased our patrol staff, our minimum manning has not increased along with it. So the way that we schedule could accommodate where we're trying to get with the 50 officers. We just can't get there without changing the minimum manning.
Okay.
I know it's a little convoluted, but I don't.
Are you able to cover everything you need to do? However you're manning and whatever, like, how is that working?
Yeah, so what we're seeing is that when we're at our minimum staffing, it can be difficult, particularly with the growth along the 110 corridor. We're often pulling from other sides of town, and Westford is massive, 32 square miles. If we're at 3 officers to cover the entire community, we'll have 3 officers on the road and at least 1 supervisor. We're pulling from other parts of the community because traditionally the Route 110 had a very small residential area.
Yeah.
But now with the increase in calls on the 3 to 11 and the overnight because of all the apartments that have been put in, we're really looking at trying to add another car to that side of town, but we can't do that without either changing minimum manning or risking response times and everything else to the other areas of town. So that's pretty much where we're seeing the biggest impact is it's delaying us from being able to really make a hard push. Whereas if we had the 2 officers that were cut, we'd be able to staff appropriately because that car that works on 110 when we're at our minimum manning really is going call to call to call, often does get backed up, or we're pulling from the other areas to cover those calls for service down there.
Thanks.
That was the same question, sort of, where or maybe just same question, but a little bit differently. So the main places that you're seeing the gaps from the desired service level that we worked on in our survey so many years ago is primarily on 110 and primarily overnight.
Yeah, with the Westford Valley that went in and the 5
of our calls.
Yeah, and the 500 plus units that are going to be going at 37 Bowers Road. That we tried to break it down by what calls we've received at Princeton Properties and over at Westford Valley, and we're anticipating an annual call increase of over 300 calls for service, not just calls, for directions like Dennis said,
Yeah.
calls where we have to respond. And the other thing about dealing with the apartment complex is it's not like you're pulling into somebody's driveway, walking into the house where it's 30 seconds into the car, out of the car and back. It's a 5-minute walk sometimes to get to somebody's apartments. That increases our time on scene, even if it's a minor call, which Dennis had alluded to about starting to capture our time on these calls and reports and everything else that goes into it. So I think that's going to be we're already seeing that draw with the new developments down there. We're going to continue to see that as we continue to expand down on 110 Powers Road and the new, I'm not sure where it stands, but even the condos that are going in at the Regency.
So the response time is affected there, and/or response times are affected other places because you had to pull people in to cover that.
Yep. Because now instead of having somebody down in Abnasset regularly, they're backing up the officer on 110. Now you get a call down in Abnasset. That person either has to clear, or the person from Forge Village has to go over to cover when we're at minimum staffing. So,
And the gap's primarily in the overnight, because it's interesting that 2 officers would solve it, so that'd be two separate patrols that would cover the first and second.
yeah,
overnight
so
shift.
currently we have, I'd rather not say in open
Yeah.
forum, but our staffing is consistent across, our minimum staffing is consistent across all 3 of our shifts, including our late night, which has a much reduced call volume. So during the days and 3 to 11s, it would be optimal if we could add an additional scheduled cruiser to our minimum manning,
Okay,
so that way we could appropriately respond to those calls without drawing from other areas.
okay, thanks.
Similar to the fire department with all the coverage that they've been doing, bouncing around. So,
Thanks.
Do you, I just had one final question. Do you capture how long a call takes in whatever?
yeah, so we had a good discussion with John and Dennis about this. So the way our RMS system works is you can capture time on scene for every unit that responds, because the dispatch punches in, they click the button and shows them out and then shows when they leave. So we can capture that. Where we're having difficulty is capturing everything else that goes into it. So you may be on the scene of a domestic violence incident where you're going to place somebody under arrest, and we have 3 cars there. We'll have a supervisor and 2 officers there. And they're on scene anywhere between 40 and, say, 50 minutes. We have all of that documented very accurately. But where we lose it is now an officer transports the arrestee back to the police station, supervisor comes back to book him. The officer's tied up in the booking with the supervisor for, say, an hour, hour and a half, until they're put in a cell or released by the bail commissioner or transported over to Billerica House of Correction. Now the officer finally gets a chance to now start his report. So from the time where they clear the scene, all of the reporting that now comes into which very often takes double the time that you're actually on the scene, because if this is going to go to court, this has to be a very thorough, very accurate report. All that information has to be entered. So you may have somebody working on a police report now for an hour and a half. You get one domestic tied up half of our shifts for half the shift. So that's where we have difficulty. The only way that we really have to do it now with our system is to audit each individual call, because our system will capture who went into each call and at what time and what time they exited it. But you have to now audit everybody that was actually involved in writing a report versus reviewing the report, or just going in to read the report. Like myself or the deputy will go in and read all the reports, and when we come in the morning from the previous shifts, it'll show that we entered it. It's a 4-page report. It takes us 8 minutes to read or 10 minutes to read, whatever. It'll say that we were in there for 8 minutes, so we would have to go through each individual line to see exactly what everybody was doing in each of those reports. So as you can imagine, that's going to be incredibly time consuming. So what we're going to be looking to doing is just taking kind of a cross-section of the different types of reports that we do, try to take 10 or 15 of each of the different types, major reports, and break those down. And again, same thing with our detectives and their investigations. And then evidence, all that will definitely take a lot of time to dig into it. We have been working with IT as well at reviewing different services, like different software programs, that we might be able to capture that a little bit more accurately, but that's down the road.
Please. Anyone else? Thank you very much. Oh, do we have something from?
No, it's a public hearings, right, so. I don't.
You don't, okay. We're good.
Cool.
Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Good night.
Thank you both.
Thanks for letting me waive my message. Very nice.
Next up is education and with Westford Public Schools. Chu and Jenny Lynn.
Put your slides down.
Thank you. Yes, please. Good evening, everybody.
So I know you have a few slides you
I
want to go
do.
through,
I
and then we'll
thought
go
it
into
might be
questions.
helpful, just before we get into questions, to provide just a little context on the past couple of years. So from the original slide presentation that I gave to the school committee on December 1st, I thought it would be helpful to talk about a couple of these slides that just highlight how we've been increasing the offsets over the last couple of years to bring to town meeting a balanced budget. So if you look at this slide specifically, it'll talk about the reductions that the school departments made from the initial request that was developed when we were looking at the needs. So you'll see from FY23, FY24, FY25 was the year that the override didn't pass, in which we needed to reduce the budget by $2 million. And now in FY27, this year, in order to bring the balanced budget to the school committee and to town meeting, we're reducing the budget by $233,000 from what we identified as our needs. If you go to the next slide, Mike, thank you. The way in which we've been able to do this is by increasing the offsets that we have every single year. So you'll see, like in FY23 and FY24, we had about $1.7 million in offsets from our revolving accounts to help support the our general operating budget. And then as that started to increase over FY25, FY26, and FY27, in FY25, when the override didn't pass, we heard clearly from the community concerns about the amount of funds that existed in our revolving accounts. And it was that time that the school committee began establishing the non-general fund guidebook, the NGFG, which has actually become a very popular document. Other communities have been asking us to look at it. It's something that we're very proud of. It's a lot of work that the school committee did. Jenny Lynn did an incredible job kind of maintaining that year to year, and we now use that each year as part of our budgeting process. In that, we identified all of the revolving accounts that we have. We attached it to, it's in the packet tonight for anybody who's paying attention. We shared that document as well, which every single account has its own page. It has the MGL, the Mass General laws that associate it with that, the specific revenues that contribute to it, the targeted end of year balance that we established for each one of those accounts. Because one of the concerns was that some of these accounts have been growing beyond what they should be. And so that was a big part of this, was to establish what should those end of year balances be, or what should those targets be. Now, in FY25, we looked and we saw, okay, we did have some higher balances in some of those accounts. And so working collaboratively with the school committee finance subcommittee, Jenny Lynn did a great job looking at, if we were to track over the next couple of years, how many years could we sustain increasing certain balances. And so in FY26 and now in FY27, you'll see that those balances have increased. And it's outlined very clearly in the NGFG as to what those balances are. But those are really using, for the most part, one-time funds to help balance this budget. And so the cliff that Christine was mentioning was that in my presentation I talked about the fact that for FY28, we are now looking at, we know that there's $465,000 that we won't have access to in FY28. So I just want to share that context for people, because I think this pattern is important. The fact that we have been proactively finding different ways to balance the budget, I think is important. And I also just want to honor the work that people have been doing in order to get us there. So if you go, I think maybe to the next slide. This just shows that, right? So you'll just see the, it just goes up and down because it's been a little rocky road. But that's the only reason it goes up and down. This timeline is just showing the same thing. FY23, FY25, there you'll see the override. FY26, we increased the offsets by another $407,000. And now in this year, the FY27 information is showing that in FY28, we're looking at the $465,000, which I just mentioned, would not be available. So I shared that. I know that not all of you were, not all of the members of the Finance Committee were on the committee when we developed the NGFG, so I kind of just want to share that context. We do have, the school committee did approve the budget. It's a 3.03% increase for the schools. we did need to figure out what that $233,000 difference would be, and we were able to meet that by increasing the offsets another $176,000. We identified some cost savings in some subscription costs, and we reduced our comp reserve additionally, which makes it just a little bit more difficult for us to be flexible in contract negotiations and in planning for any specific changes that could take place next year. But that's sort of the budget in general, and with that, I would open it up for questions.
Great, thank you so much. Questions, community members? Anybody else? You're always first, Dennis, but go ahead.
No, I just wanted to, again, commend them for what they did. We offered the recommendation about that, but they took it and really developed it. And it reminds me of when you pick an old suit out of your closet and you find you have 20 bucks in the pocket that you didn't have. It's kind of the same idea. They did a great job with it, both of these did. And I think town benefited greatly by it, so it was good work. Good work.
Well, I appreciate that analogy from my fellow committee member. I also think it's important to recognize it feels a little bit also like you didn't find the 20 bucks and you had to go find it from somebody else by making significant changes in the programmatic offerings. And I think that's important to not be lost here of what's occurred in the past. There seems to be a bit of a narrative that I've picked up around town that, see, everything's fine. And I assure you as a parent, that's not the feeling. And that like most people in this town, I moved here because of the high quality schools. And I think we are on a very dangerous track right now to head towards a path that doesn't sustain the high quality schools that Westford expects and deserves. And it was very unfortunate that override failed in the way it did. But I also think it's important to recognize that, and Dr. True, your slides indicate this, that there were substantial personnel reductions that occurred as a result of the failed override. That is how all of that savings ultimately was achieved. It wasn't just reserve funding, that, oh, we had the cash and made no changes, that the school committee made very difficult decisions, which are now, unfortunately, rearing their ugly head. And to see, as a parent, at a place like Robinson, 24 first graders having come from a 16-to-2 ratio with educators to a 24-to-1 in a space with another 24 first graders in the same room, and to have gone in there as a volunteer, I don't know how the teachers do it, and I certainly don't know how the students do it. It is not fair, and it's going to cause us to slip in the high-quality education system that we expect and deserve for the young people of this town, which are the future of Westford. And so I just think it's important to recognize that I want to be clear that I don't see it as finding $20 or any amount of money in our pockets. I think the creative solution that the school board committee and the superintendent have taken in drawing down reserves fund has lessened the pain, but also pushed off inevitable, difficult decisions that will need to be made. And some have already happened, and the number of personnel that no longer are serving our students at a time that we're expecting to grow as a town is concerning. And so I just want to put on the record that I commend you and the school committee for making the very difficult decisions you have, but I also want you to know that I see you and that is not something that we should come to expect, nor is it something that we should be coming okay with or used to in this town. I think we do have to figure out how we re-embrace our schools as the backbone of our community. Thanks.
Sure. So thank you for pointing out the fact that now after all the school committee and Jenny's hard work, you've sort of drawn down to the appropriate level in the revolving accounts and can't draw down anymore. So that spigot's closed, more or less. I think there's some also, please correct me, but I think there's some other things in this budget that kind of broke our way and in a way that you would not expect to repeat necessarily. At least you don't have any information that would repeat. Like I'm thinking about the special education funding that I don't know if you want to explain, but basically you get reimbursed for spending from previous years. That again won't necessarily repeat. So are there other things you want to draw people's attention to, I guess, that
Sure.
are
So,
sort
I
of
mean-
favorable here that we shouldn't expect to repeat?
Sure, thank you. And one of the things, going back to Nate's comments too, one of the other pieces in here is that we also did increase fees, right? So when you talk about, again, finding the $20 from someplace else, one of the pieces is there are some fees that are being increased in order to make some of these revolving accounts remain sustainable as well. And to your point, one of the things that we have seen recently is that because we have had significant increases in special education costs, we have seen increase in the support for special education funding from the state as well too. But that also can change every single year. Special education in general is something that is very difficult to predict because it could change based on just the student population changing every year from somebody moving into town and moving out of town. One of the things that we needed to do last year is we needed to draw from our special education reserve fund, which we had been trying to build up over the last couple of years. And so last year, at the very end of the year, we all came together, and something we shared with the tri-board was the idea that we needed to take $400,000 out of that fund in order to help balance the budget in general. And so that's now funds that won't be available in the future as well too. But we have received some increased funding from the state, but that changes each year. And so we don't know. One of the things that is a part of this budget is the assumption that the FY27 budget will also have the $150 per pupil expenditure that was passed for the FY26 budget. But what we know is that in the governor's budget right now, it's only at $75. So right now, we're trying to be hopeful that that will actually go back to the 150 because it has hit that mark for a couple of years, but it's not something that's happened regularly. So I don't know if those are the types of things that you were kind of alluding to.
And just other structural things like
Yeah.
the population of students that you're educating, it might be very, very slowly ticking down, but it's
Yeah.
not changing in a significant way.
No.
There's no big budget gain you're going to get from educating fewer students next year.
No, there's not. And we did look at, that was one of the conversations that went into, in when we were looking at FY23 and FY24, we were talking about how the population has decreased. And we are looking at, with the MSBA project for Robinson School, we're looking at a possibility of consolidation of schools in the future, which is not part of the general budget, but it's part of our future outlook as to what we're thinking for what the public schools look like in the future. But with that, we did significant 10-year enrollment projections, both through NESDEC, which is the New England, I can't remember the entire acronym at this moment in time, but it's a New England organization that deals with enrollments. But MSBA, the Massachusetts School Building Authority, also does their own enrollment projections. So we looked at both of those together, and they saw that we're really flatlined. And so in the next 10 years, they predict that we'll have 100 students increase, and even then, it'll be across all grades. So it wouldn't be like one of those pockets that goes through. And so they're saying that we really look like we were at a higher number, but now we've decreased, but now it's going to be stable for a number of years. So to your point, we don't see a significant difference in the funding for special education unless that changes with the needs of the individual students, but also with just our per pupil expenditures that comes from the state in general.
I have one other question, but maybe I'll defer to John. Should I finish up? So the same question that we've asked our colleagues in police and fire about service level, with the resources you have, where are the gaps showing up in the service level that we target? I know there's some class size issues that continue to be kind of a dialogue. Are there other areas where you're seeing kind of service level trade-offs that we at least should make the public aware of?
I do think that the first concern is class sizes, right? Because what we think, when you throw around a number of like 24 to 26, you might think, oh, that's not a big deal, okay? And people had other experiences in other communities. If somebody who's moved here and they had a different experience when they were growing up, they might have had different number of students in the classes. But the fact is the way in which students are educated and the students that are being educated in the classrooms, it's different. And so our teachers, we might have a teacher who's been with us for 20 years. And 20 years ago, they might have had 24 to 25 students in a classroom. But they didn't have as many students who would be identified as having high needs, whether they are whether they have an IEP and receive special education services, whether they have a 504 for different accommodations, or whether they might be an ELL student, or they might just be someone with a low income. And the idea is that this is the way that the state looks at how they identify the high needs, and that percentage has increased. And so when you have students who we're expecting to collaborate on a regular basis, because it's also different. We're not educating kids in rows, right? They're not sitting in a classroom and passively receiving knowledge the way many of us grew up. The whole idea of education is that they are collaborating from the earliest ages, and they're working in small groups. And every time you add 3 or 4 students or 5 students to a classroom, you've now created an entire group that now needs to be getting this additional feedback and or to be able to rotate at the elementary levels, to be able to rotate through one of the different sections or the different, I'm losing my words in terms of the centers. Thank you. The elementary teachers behind me can help me out there. That one of the things that has become a staple of great education, now you've created an entire group that means that other students need to wait to access that learning opportunity. And so there might be another great thing for them to do, but there's a delay in their ability to do those things that the teachers have put together for them for those lessons or for that unit in general. And so it seems like it's not a big deal, but when Nate's talking about a first grade classroom with 24 students in it, these are the students who are learning how to read, right? And so our guidelines, it's not a policy, but the guidelines have been trying to keep class sizes for our K-2 really below 18. The research has been clear for years, at least 30, probably maybe even 40 years, that class sizes above 15 in grades pre-K to 3 has a significant impact on student learning. Above grade 3, there's not a lot of research for it. So it just becomes anecdotal when you talk about the impact that it has on folks. But we're not talking about our youngest learners not being able to have the class sizes that we've been able to sustain in Westford for a long time. So I think that becomes, that would be the highlight of the issue. We did reduce our interventionists. We changed that model. We do still have interventions that are taking place. I believe we are still meeting the needs of our students. And that's one of those challenges where Westford is still a great public school system. They are still schools filled with joy, and our teachers are doing an incredible job making sure the kids feel welcomed and that they are making progress. But the work that they're being asked to do is really just honestly breaking their backs. And they're being asked to do more and more and more every year with less and less. And that becomes, I think, the biggest challenge. We'll continue to focus on schools being a happy place for kids to learn, but the morale in the buildings is starting to wane because of what we're asking our educators to do. That's the best way I can say it.
And to get to the target class sizes that you've been talking about, knowing that it's a complicated math problem because you've got different configurations in different buildings, but is that like 3 or 4 teachers or 10 teachers? Like what if you were able to solve this principal problem you've identified, class size, what would that look like if you solved it?
So that's a good question. So when we look at our projected class sizes for next year, we have one group that's an outlier. So in our elementary schools, for grade 5 at day school next year, they would still be in the 25 to 26 range. And so what we're planning to do is add another section there. It's not in the budget. It's something that we've talked about. I've worked with Kristen and Dan O'Donnell to talk about the commitment to funding that, although we don't exactly know where the funding is going to come from. We believe that we'll be able to figure that out and address that in October town meeting if an adjustment needs to be made either to the school budget or in another department when we finally see all of the state aid that comes in. That's the outlier right now that seems to be different than everybody else. The last couple of years, we did have higher class sizes. Those students are moving into middle school and up to the academy, where there still are concerns that we need to be addressing and we want to pay close attention to. My concern is FY28, are we able to continue to fund the schools the way that we think we can? Where is that initial $465,000 going to come from? And are we going to have other needs when we're looking at the heating costs, when we're looking at the special education costs, when we're looking at these things in FY28, are we going to need to do something different? And at that moment in time, we now know we don't want to go back to having higher class sizes. So I do think, to your point, I think if we're able to bring in one additional teacher, potentially if we have additional students move in over the summer, 2 additional teachers, that could help us maintain status quo. And we would have class sizes at the elementary schools that would be between 22, 23 or less, which would be historically where we've been. Another interesting thing for people who are familiar with the schools, the Abbott building is very different than any of the other buildings, and the classrooms are much smaller. So typically we've had smaller class sizes and maybe more sections at Abbott because those rooms are just smaller. So that's one of the things we always want to look at. Principal Meyerson has done a great job over the last couple of years rethinking the way they're using the rooms. And so they've put kids in larger rooms because they have larger class sizes in order to make it work. That's something that we're paying attention to as well too. But right now, if you look at all of the class sizes projected for FY27 outside of that grade 5, you'll see more uniformity across where you're going to see more of the 20 to 22s. Now, of course, I also mentioned that, the class sizes K to 3, 15 and over has an impact. We haven't seen 15 in a long time. That isn't typical, but in the K to 2 schools, if we could keep them closer to the 18s, that would be ideal.
Okay, so day 5th grade is sort of flashing red right now.
It's flashing red right now, and we do have a plan to address it.
And you're in dialogue, I know. Yeah. And then, but a bigger issue is you're starting off $460,000 behind level next year plus. You're going to have additional commitments that you need to make.
Yes, I feel like from a budgetary standpoint, we've been treading water. And so we were afloat this year. That's why we did talk about it is kind of fragile. We've been able to do that. That's why when I talk about the idea that we were using the offsets to keep things balanced, but we can't continue to do that. We had a specific plan, but that doesn't exist anymore. And so my bigger concern is FY28, and I want to make sure that everybody hears that clearly, that I don't necessarily know how that will be funded.
Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, thank you. I think I'd like to echo the sentiment that I really appreciate all the hard work that's gone into this. I think kind of like Nate said, I've been in situations where I've had to drop into a company and try to manage something under duress, and I know, I've had meetings before where I could say something like, yes, I made payroll for this week at this company, but so the number looks fine, but you don't want to know what I had to do to get there, right? I had to pull this and pull that, and next week I'm not sure about that, right? So it's like the number is the number and I hit it, but I had to make sacrifices to get there, and I think so. Those types of situations sort of pressure test everybody's assumptions, and I think just kind of going back to the failed override. I wasn't sitting on the finance committee at that point, but I remember watching it relatively closely. And I know that we had to scramble, right? There was the budget that we had, and then we had to come up with a new one very quickly. And in those documents that came out, there were a lot of numbers that were listed as cuts to the school system. But at that point in time, it was really difficult to tell what that actually meant, in terms of, for the students or for the kind of the general quality of education, or which ones of those are the most meaningful in terms of Westford being a great school system that produces well-educated students. So I'm wondering, just kind of for this period, well, I guess to continue after the override then last year, it felt a bit like the budget was really kind of a continuation of what happened in the prior year, and there were some things that kind of broke positively for us. So then we kind of were able to keep it under there. But what I haven't quite connected yet are what are the most important things, right? Or what does it mean to the students to cut this and not this? Or maybe if you could just kind of list what are the priorities and why are those the most important things? I think you might have kind of answered at least class size for one of them.
Well, I would say in addition to class size too, when we talk about the cuts that took place impacted students' access to courses at Westford Academy as well, okay? So there were, one of the best examples would be in which what we tried not to do was to eliminate any programming. But what we did do is we reduced access to it. So certain grades weren't able to access AP classes. So there were students who might have been able to take an AP class in their sophomore year as they're trying to look at their overall transcript and have a plan as to what they want to do if they want to head off to college or whatever their post WA plans might be. And then all of a sudden it was like, we only can run so many sections, so therefore it has to be prioritized to the juniors and seniors. So sophomores were immediately not allowed to take certain classes. The world languages, rather than eliminating a language, we combined levels of languages. So students who might be in the 4th or 5th year of a language, we put them together in the same class. And at some points, it was also the combination of college prep and an honors level in the same class of maybe even two different languages, which we hoped would be something that would be manageable, but then find out that you end up with so many different classes taking place at one time that it just ends up having a negative impact on the student overall experience. And so people aren't able to progress at the level that they would have been able to otherwise. So those are two examples, okay. I think. The class sizes specifically at the elementary schools have been a big deal. Historically, it's been the elementary schools and the middle schools that were seeing more of the cuts that would take place each year when we were looking at the enrollment changes, right? So we had more reductions at those levels, but we didn't necessarily see the same impact of options at the middle schools. I would say the bigger piece would be at Westford Academy.
One more question? One more? It strikes me that in education, that that when somebody starts to see the effects of policy changes and spending changes, I would imagine there'd be a delay. So how, I know the teachers feel it, they feel it right away because now all of a sudden you have 10 more kids in your class, or right. So on and so forth. But when will we know what the effects were of like the 2025 adjustments to the budget?
I can't answer that. Because I would say, I mean, you're right, it is a delay, right? So if it depends on what we're looking at, right? So if we're looking at achievement in standardized testing, it could take a couple of years, right? If we're looking at just the immediate satisfaction of the experience in the classroom, it's immediate, okay? If it's the impact that not being able to take a certain class at a certain time at the academy, we might not know until they're finally putting their whole transcript together as to whether or not they were able to access something else outside of the academy, or whether they're just trying to take different courses there. It does take a few years. And when you think about, when we looked at, maybe a better example would be when we started tracking the impact of COVID. Okay, so people were talking about that impact, and what we knew was that the students who were in kindergarten when the world shut down, had a completely different experience, and when they hit third grade, we expected those state assessments, the MCAS tests, to be lower than they typically were, and they were, because we knew that. We knew that they didn't have the same foundational skills, but it took, that would be kindergarten, that's 4 years before they really hit, and they take the test in third grade, we don't see the results until they're in fourth grade.
Mhm. Yeah, I guess that's kind of like my concern after, Nate's comments, is that there's kind of this undefined rolling, for lack of a better term, sort of tech debt, if you're familiar with that term, where it's there, it has to be addressed at some time, and or it's going to manifest at some point in time in problems or outages. So we really don't know what that effect is, but I think it's important for people to understand that we haven't necessarily seen what that means for our schools yet.
True.
As we look forward.
Right, yeah. Thank you. Oh, Beth has her hand up. Beth, you have a question?
I just was wondering if we're seeing any impact on school choice enrollment, because I think that is an area we could see impact, because we won't be, a district that parents want to send their kids to in school choice, because, maybe we're not as desirable now. So I'm just wondering if we're seeing any impact in those numbers.
Thank you. That's a good question. We actually haven't seen that yet. Each year, we still have a wait list. We do a public lottery for our school choice openings every single year in the summer, and we do always have a wait list of students that still want to be coming to Westford, but I haven't been counting to see if the length of the wait list is the same. So that's actually a pretty good thing to look at. We can go back and look and see, do we have as many people on the wait list this last year as we did the year before?
All set, Beth?
No last question.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
I just wanted to make a couple points, and then I'll go to you, Noel, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So I'm going to shift gears a little bit, and the school building usage revolving fund is getting pretty healthy, which is great. And I did see a comment from the finance subcommittee that you kind of wanted to let it sit there and make sure that it's kind of stable, and that makes sense. But I'm sort of wondering if there's an opportunity here to increase rentals. Like, what are you seeing? Like, why is that revenue increasing? Can we tap into that?
So that was something that started only a few years ago.
Right.
And so we've done a couple of reviews with it, right? We looked, first we looked at the tiers that we had. I think that's part of one of the regular practices of the subcommittee, the FinCom the school committee finance subcommittee, is looking at the reviews and looking at that process as well too, to see, okay, wait a second. When we initially set those rates, they were based on comps, and so we were looking to see what made the most sense. Yes, that has been growing. We had no idea as to what that would be, and so now that originally our target was just keeping the amount in there in order to pay for the coordinator to oversee all of that. And now we're saying, okay, wait a second, I think that's something that we could have that could help with some of the preventative maintenance that we're not able to deal with. It's not enough to really cover that yet, but it has been something that's helped us to deal with some smaller issues. But that is something that's a regular practice now, to say, okay, wait a second, now that we've been doing this for 3 years, are those the right rates that we should be having? And so one of the conversations that took place when we were even looking at the fees across the board for everything was this notion of, we're not going to wait 10 years before we adjust the fees anymore, because that's one of the things that had happened. So one of the fees we're increasing is the tuition for preschool. It hasn't been touched in a long time, and so we're adjusting it. But then we want to look at it every single year, because we don't want it to be a massive increase when we haven't adjusted it. And so the same thing, that's a separate conversation that we're having with Director of Facilities, Jeff Goodwin, and the Facilities Department, because they're helping to look at, okay, is it covering the custodial costs? Is it covering what we need there? That's the first priority, is to make sure that we're not losing money by letting people use the buildings. But we are looking at that.
I guess I was not only thinking about the fees, but which groups are coming in and using the buildings? And are there other similar groups that, maybe you reach out to and say, hey, these school buildings are available?
Yeah.
To increase that.
It's a fine line, right? Because you want to increase that opportunity, but then one of the things that I've seen happen in other communities is that then it becomes to a point that people want to access the buildings that it has a negative impact on the school programming.
Okay.
So that's what we just want to balance, but
Sure.
I think it's a good point.
Okay. And then for food service, so I've been looking at that revolving account, and it's still pretty high, and it says so in the NGFG, so I know that the finance subcommittee is aware of it. The maintenance that was, I had asked a question about what maintenance might be coming out of that account, and there were a few things listed. I think it added up to about $300,000. But I haven't seen anything come to capital last year or this year, and so I'm just wondering how that happens and when these expenditures will actually take place. Will we see it at capital?
So typically, the only thing that we've brought to capital in my tenure was the refrigerator at the Miller School. And originally, we brought it to capital because we were hoping to use other funds, and then we decided to use the food service when we realized that we needed to be spending that down. The other things we haven't typically done and brought to capital because of even the timeline in which it happens, right? So it might be something that happens in the spring and needs to be addressed right away, or it's happening, and so it hasn't fallen into that, so that has not been our practice.
I thought at some meeting sometime, I thought I had it in my head that some of these things would come through capital, but I don't know if they need to. I'm just.
We can look at it. I think
curious.
to me, it's more about the capital schedule. The way that it works is planning for the next year.
It's not
and
super convenient.
most of the food service issues sometimes tend to be with an emergency that has to be dealt with. So it would just be about what would be the best way to communicate it, right? So like.
Yeah, I'll leave that to you, Kristen. I mean, capital's
we can
your
talk about
committee.
that.
I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah, let me get some more history on it as well.
Sure.
Okay. Because the food service account is still a little high.
Mhm.
What I'd like to balance, what are their needs? What equipment do they need to replace, repair, whatever? But at the same time, I'm looking at health insurance and retirement costs that don't even show up in the school budget. They show up in the town budget. It's over $1 million for food service employees. So, food service is sort of billed as being self-sustaining, and I think from the actual food perspective it is, but if you look at it from a whole, it's not. So it's a little out of balance when you see the high revolving fund and these other expenses.
Okay. That was something that we'd started talking about with Dan
Yep.
to look and see and we can continue that conversation.
Yeah,
as well.
and you have. I mean, I know
Yeah.
you've done the head custodian, and there's been,
Yeah.
so it's evolving. I'm just making that
Sure.
point.
I would like to add something here because we are required by DESI to maintain
The
3 months of
Yeah.
equivalent
I know
of
that.
operating expenditure. That's about like $750,000 to $800,000.
Sure.
So if we use food service account to pay for any food service employees benefit, this account will be depleted
Sure.
in like 2 or 3
Yeah.
years.
I'm not saying
So
100%.
Which is not sustainable.
Totally understand that. I'm
Sure.
just pointing out
Something,
that
yeah.
there's,
Okay.
that's it. Okay. Go ahead, Noelle.
Thank you. 2 questions. How is the school prioritizing early literacy recovery from those students whose reading development was affected during COVID? And what resources or changes are being considered to ensure that those students don't continue to fall behind as they move through the grades? And also, how are families being informed if their child is struggling with foundational literacy skills?
That's a really big question, Noel, and I appreciate that. So in this budget discussion, I'll talk about the way in which we're allocating resources for that, right? One of the things we have been looking at the data every single year, and so our curriculum coordinators have been working with the principals and with the teachers. They have regular data meetings when they're looking to see what that development is. We have put different resources in at different grade levels. We've been targeting interventions. As far as people being notified, the schools do a great job communicating with families about where their students are in terms of their achievements. So based on the Dibbles performances, based on the different assessments that the elementary schools have each year, they communicate if they think that additional resources and additional interventions are warranted for those students. We had extensive conversations last year around how we were supporting specifically the 5th grade students last year, where was the group of students that were identifying as a cohort as the group that was most impacted. And so we had put additional resources and rethought the way the teachers were focusing their literacy instruction. We did it real time during the school year, and then we looked at how we were going to communicate that information to the 6th grade, because now they're in 6th grade this year. So those curriculum coordinators worked with the curriculum coordinators for the 6 through 12 schools, and so they looked at how they might still be able to continue some of those resources. There was the specific the specific program that we were using. I'm losing what it was at the time. It's not my area of expertise, but I'm trying to think. Courtney, do you remember when?
The ELA program at Abbott. They put it.
Yeah, and specifically, we did the same thing as they went to 6th grade. Catherine, you might remember, because we had a lot of conversations about that at the school committee.
The name is escaping.
I can't remember, but we specifically targeted that group, Noel, because we saw that there was, at least across the grade level, there was a noticeable deficiency that was different than the others. And so we have been watching it, and like I said, when individual students have been identified, that information has gone to those families.
Great, thank you.
Can I just add something,
Yeah,
Dr.?
please.
Just to bring that back to a budget conversation, there were 4 middle school interventionists that were reduced as part of the override failure.
Right.
And those COVID kindergartners are in middle school now, so that's another piece to that.
Remember, no interventionists.
Thank you.
Thanks, Valerie.
I have a couple more, but I'll let.
Just one. Dr. Chu, could you clarify one thing for me? It has to do with the school choice program. The money went down, I think, as I recall.
It escalates. I mean, it ebbs and flows. Okay, it's usually, we're actually looking at the history of it. It kind of changes by about $50,000.
But my concern, it wasn't really necessarily because there weren't people that wanted to use the program. It was we just we wouldn't take them. Is that correct?
No, actually, it's not it at all. Our numbers haven't changed that much in terms of the number of school choice students that we have and the openings that we provide. The school choice program, there's a base amount that's established for every single student, and that's $5,000 per student. But on top of that, if a student is coming to us from another community and they're receiving special education services, then we'll receive additional funds based on whatever those services are, and that becomes the variable. So we might have a student who is in our system who might have been we might be receiving a little bit more from their sending district based on their services, and they might graduate. And then that might decrease there, because then another student who might have taken their spot. So if that student graduated in 12th grade, and then we brought in, for example, a new kindergartner or first grade, they might not have the same special education support. So then there's going to be a decrease in that funding.
It's just a function of the demographics, right?
It is. And so the variable really lies in what types of services are being provided. Because the $5,000 is standard for every single student that's coming to us. And our numbers have been, the school choice numbers have actually been going up.
Okay.
One of my other questions is, oh, go ahead, Chris. I'll let you go.
Yeah, thank you. Just a fee-related question. Do the schools charge outside or non-school related groups the use of their fields? And if so, where does that money go? Is it going into one of these accounts that you have in this handbook? And what is that money used for?
That goes to the building rental account, revolving account. That's what we have been using.
It goes into the school building usage?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, we use
Well, it depends on the field.
Depends on the field.
It does, because some of the fields are actually, we actually have the athletics, if it's one of our athletic fields versus, say, just a field, right?
I'm thinking more along the lines of the athletic field. I didn't realize there are other fields that people use.
Because we actually also have people who want to use parking lots. So we actually decided that we would have a rate for if they wanted to do an event in a parking lot. So the athletic fields, that has been going, that's been going into the athletics revolving account. And that was established before we even established the building usage. So one of the things we want to do is bring all of that together to make sure that there's consistency across those expectations, and that's something that we have on our to-do list.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I have one. So facilities. I would like to see the facilities expenses removed from the school department budget, honestly, and placed under facilities. Because with so many school buildings, facility costs, the facility costs and the educational priorities end up competing with one another, right?
Mm-hmm.
Puts you in a difficult position, Dr. Chu, an unfair position, to have to decide between those two priorities, right? To put education against facilities. Do you decide what educational programs might be cut so that you can heat the building, or, maintenance projects are deferred so that, classroom sizing stays the same, whatever. And I just think separating these two would provide a clearer mechanism for prioritization, kind of at a different level. Like, I just don't think it's fair for you to have to pit those two things together.
Well, I don't want to disagree with you. I appreciate that. When I became a superintendent, I had a mentor, and the first thing he said to me was, "You are not a facilities expert. You are an educational leader. That is what you've been trained to do." So I appreciate that.
And I know Jeff Goodwin is great about
Fantastic.
working with you guys,
Oh,
but I
absolutely. He does
just,
an incredible job.
I feel like it still gets kind of muddy,
How that works in the overall town budget?
Sure, and so I understand that, but again, I just think budget-wise, it gets super muddy, right?
It might
So-
be worth seeing if there are other communities that
There
have done
are.
that. So, okay, great.
Lots of them.
There are a
I
number
can
of
pull out the budget task force and show you, Nate. In fact, most of them do. I did that research for budget task force, and most of them pull that stuff out of the individual departments and keep it separately. So, food for thought for next year.
And evolving part of our capital.
Yes, exactly. I know we've talked about it before, but I just kind of wanted to say that. And then my one other comment on school choice is you had talked about, the sort of different levels based on the students' needs, the different amount of money essentially that you get for different students' needs. And you were talking about potentially opening up more school choice slots this spring or next year, whenever that happens. And I would just suggest that internally, you do some kind of an evaluation on your current school choice kids to make sure that they're not impacting the operational budget, right? You don't know what the kids are gonna come in needing. And I would just just take a look at that so that you're not putting yourself in a bad situation financially.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair comment. That's I think why we look at it closely every single day, right? So one of the things, we don't want to impact class sizes. Historically, we weren't really opening slots very much in the 6 through 12 range.
Yeah.
But that's one of the things we've looked at recently to say, okay, well, wait a second, is there a way in order for us to provide opportunities that make sense? One of the things that we did look at, and I talked about this for the past couple of years with the school committee, is that we do also, as part of our contract, we support bringing in students of faculty members.
Yes.
And one of the things we do is we will enter them into the school lottery, school choice lottery, which we're allowed to do. If they're not selected into the school choice lottery, though, we'll still educate them, and we won't necessarily be receiving funds. And so that's something we've looked at proactively to say, wait a second, are there ways in which we can maximize that so that we are actually receiving the funds for the enrollment that we actually have?
Yes. Yep.
And so that's really kind of the focus, is to see how can we be as proactive as possible.
Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Just to follow up on school choice, have you looked at your applicants for the lottery to determine what percentage are town or school district employees? I don't know if that's a data question on there. It just would strike me to wonder like what the balance is of people who work in this town and give their careers to this town but don't live here, wanting their kids to go to school here, compared to the desirability of people who don't work in this town and just want their kids to come to school here. I see those as two different pockets.
Sure.
I don't know that the law allows you to look at that in that way, but I'm wondering if it's data you've ever collected or thought about collecting.
Yeah, it's certainly nothing that we can consider in the lottery, but it's but it is data. Right?
Do you already?
It kind of goes to what I was just saying.
Yeah.
Like we act, because every single student that that we have, as we share that data with the state, as we have to do every single year with our state reporting, we have to code whether they are a resident of Westford, whether they are a school choice, or whether they are enrolled, and it's a tuition agreement, right? So that it's a waived tuition agreement, which would mean that's the way it's coded for someone who is a faculty member who has their student in the school system. And so that data is very clear. And now those were the numbers that I kind of shared with the school committee, showing how many people that we had in those categories. You're right, it can't impact a decision as to whether or not you are letting them in to school choice. But we haven't looked at it to see what those percentages would be. It's interesting.
Anybody else?
I don't see anything online.
Anybody in the audience? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
We're going to move on to old business and our meeting minutes.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. Okay, thanks. And it's a roll call vote. John?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Noel?
Hi.
Chris?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Thank you. Thank you,
Thanks.
Finance Committee.
Thank you for letting us join you.
See you guys next week. Yeah. All right, so give everybody a couple minutes to clear. Do we have any old business?
Review stuff, so it isn't my mind.
I don't have enough.
Yeah, I don't think we need one.
Continuing,
Okay.
yeah.
So anything on old business? Anybody have any old business? I don't think so. Okay, meeting minutes. Did everyone get a chance to take a look at the January 15th, 2026 meeting minutes?
Move. Second.
Okay, vote. Beth?
Abstain, I wasn't at the meeting.
Okay, Hari?
Aye.
All right, John?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Nate?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Shelby? Aye. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 0, 1. All right, that passes. Yeah, but I don't think we need to do board and committee updates because we kind of just got one unless anybody has anything majorly breaking.
I just note that capital planning's meeting tomorrow morning to go over their
Yes.
final recommendations, just want to give a general overview.
Okay, thanks, yeah. I will be at that meeting, so very little changing. All right, and then we have our future meetings.
Just one question. What, I know that we had talked about this, but at some point in time, I mean, there's a lot of things going on. And we're going to have an opportunity, which one of the meetings do you think would have the opportunity to actually have a roundtable and maybe throw out some ideas?
For the budget specifically, I've been talking to Dan about, gosh, which one did we talk?
The 12th.
Was it the 12th?
Next week is
Thank
going to
you.
be very heavy.
Yeah. Yeah, so probably like on the 12th, which I think we'll have the warrant article for the budget,
Okay.
correct? Kristen, I
Yes,
think
they'll be
that'll
closing
start
the warrant on the 10th at the
10th.
select board meeting,
Okay,
so you will have the warrant.
so as we're discussing and taking our vote for the budget warrant article, we can.
When does the
I'll leave a little
when does
bit
the
of time for
CPA
that.
come up?
They're still meeting,
They met this
so
week, and then I think they have another
They
meeting
have
before
like
they make their recommendations.
three more meetings. They have 4 more meetings. It's gonna be at our second warrant hearing. We have like 17, I think, that we're gonna be looking at. So we're gonna have 2 meetings. So it'll be at the second one, which I'm guessing is the 19th?
26th.
26th. Yeah, why did I think 19th? Okay, the 26th.
The 19th is a Thursday.
Okay, wow, imagine that, okay. All right.
We're not meeting on the 19th, right?
We are not, because that's school vacation week, yeah.
Great.
Okay. Anybody else have anything before we adjourn? Gonna get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Okay. All in favor, Beth?
Aye.
Ari?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
I'm an aye. Nate?
Aye.
Dennis?
Aye.
Shelby?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Good.